Hello and welcome to the FatBOSS guide to Oregorger on Mythic in the Blackrock Foundry.
Yes, and this encounter is actually pretty easy for a Mythic boss.
Yeah, we thought that it would be, I thought at least that it was going to be fucking scary and horrible to do because it is pretty difficult on Heroic, but like from Heroic to Mythic,
yeah, the
there's
transition
not really that much different.
Yeah, it's very, very similar. It still is a two-phase fight, and not a huge amount of abilities have actually been added. You just need to do all the Heroic abilities the way that you did Heroic. You just need to do it better. You need to perfect it.
Now, if you haven't seen the Heroic mode guide for this fight and you know absolutely nothing about Oregorger, make sure you do click up on the annotation you see on your screen now, and that'll take you straight to that video. You can go and learn it because we're not going to be covering how to deal with the Heroic mode.
Now, for this encounter, you do want to bring 2 tanks. You want to bring around 5 healers, and you want to bring a mixture of ranged and melee DPS. Now, let's move straight in. Phase 1. Like we said, you want to kind of use a similar tactic to Heroic. Definitely in terms of positioning, you just need to make sure that you keep putting the wretched Blackrock pools close to the walls of the room, just maximizing the amount of space you have. Melee, you need to react the exact same way that you did with the explosive shards, so be stacked on one location and swap as soon as the shard spawns. The Blackrock barrage ability is exactly the same, except you now need to interrupt the ability 5 times rather than 3, so you do need to add extra people into your interrupt rotation.
Now, Acid Torrent hits much harder. If you do not use any cooldown at all, it will potentially one-hit your tank, and that means it will likely one-hit the majority of your ranged players. Now, you should only get a maximum of 7 Acid Torrents per phase 1, and you need to organise what CDs are going to be used on your tank on which torrent, so not only he survives, but so does the raid. If done correctly, you shouldn't actually need to use any of your healing cooldowns to top the raid between each single Acid Torrent, which allows you to save some of them like Tranquility and all that kind of good stuff for phase 2.
Now, having 3 paladins using Clemency should almost allow you to use Sacrifice on your tanks for almost every single Acid Torrent. Iron Bark, if used on an early Acid Torrent, say the first one, will actually be up for the 6th or the 7th one. You need to make sure that you utilize your pain suppressions, your barriers, everything like that, and of course make sure you place the barrier on the tank. It doesn't need to be on the raid. You're reducing the amount of damage on the tank only. And tanks, of course, you have your own personal cooldowns. But keep in mind that the damage you are taking is in fact physical, so you could even throw an armor potion into your cooldown rotation somewhere, or just save it for a panic moment.
Now, it is noted that this ability potentially can also be reduced by placing damage absorb shields on your tank, but after trying this ourselves, it didn't really seem to have an effect. I'm not sure if it's bugged. It's very unclear whether or not this works. Everyone's saying we're not really sure.
It didn't work for us.
Yes, it's a bit odd. So what you should do to counter this ability effectively to reduce the amount of damage on the raid across the entire fight is to try and stack as many cooldowns on the tank for each of the torrents. Work out what you have available in your raid before you even pull, and work out what you'll be using for each torrent.
Now, by the time that phase 1 is finished, and then you have then completed phase 2, and you do come back to the original phase 1, it's very likely that all your CDs are back up, so you should be able to use the same rotation every single time. Now, once you have got through this first phase 1, and you've managed to reduce the amount of damage on the entire raid by using all those CDs at the right time, you will enter phase 2. Now, phase 2 works very similar to how it did on Heroic. The boss will still roll, and he'll still roll in the exact same paths to collect the ore that you break out from the crates. The only difference that in this phase, once he has rolled, and he does crash into one of these set locations, he spawns a little fiery egg-looking thing called Unstable Slag.
Now, after these eggs have spawned, if he does crash into them again, which is pretty likely because he's rolling around for fucking ages, this egg will then send out a wave of fire that will move straight down all the lanes around it. So think Bomberman. It turns into Bomberman. This phase is just Bomberman eggs, and it's pretty awesome. Now, this fire will actually also cause the other eggs to send out fire also if it hits them. So potentially, if he has a shit ton of eggs on the ground, he can set up a huge chain reaction that can send out loads of fire waves all over the place. Now, the fire itself doesn't do a lot of damage, but if you are hit by multiple ones at the same time, you could potentially die. And if this is comboed with either a roll or an AoE crash damage, you're going to be pretty much one-shot.
So the tactic that we use for this phase is actually pretty similar to a Heroic one, surprisingly. Except we generally don't follow the boss as religiously as we did before. If you've seen our Heroic guide, you'd see how we do that. What we do is that we move towards the middle of the room and tend to stay around these 4 lanes. We only ever really leave these lanes to go and kill boxes when the boss is just absolutely nowhere near them and it's safe for you to do so. When stood in this middle area, it's actually pretty difficult to be hit by the roll, especially if you're stood near these crash points and move to where the bosses come from after he's finished the roll, and we assume that you know all the points from doing heroic. And this middle area is also really great for dodging the fire pretty easily. It's likely that once there's lots of eggs up and they're all chaining, you probably will get hit by one of these fires, but if you're completely stacked up, it's super easy to heal up. Now, healing cooldowns in this phase are absolutely amazing if you do have them available, especially things like Revival, as you can heal people that are out of line of sight, or they're like stupidly far away, but it isn't 100% needed. Just try and stay stacked up as much as you possibly can, and when you do decide to trail off away from the raid to kill boxes, just make sure you're top first.
Now, towards the end of the phase, when the boss is starting to do higher and higher AoE damage to the raid, it is a good idea to start using things like Aura Mastery at this point. That's very, very good. And the fire egg things, they will actually stay up for the rest of the fight. So your second phase 2 may be slightly more difficult as you do have to run away from more fire, but normally it's a shorter phase 2 because you have a shit ton of excess all over the place, so it will generally end quicker, but it's generally a lot more fiery.
So just to summarize the phase, hang around in the middle, dodge the fire as much as you possibly can. If you do need to soak one of these fire lines to run through it just to avoid a roll or whatever, then fine. Just make sure that you're in range of a healer and you're with the group. And when you do go away from the raid to go kill any boxes that are miles away from the boss and you know it's safe to do it, make sure you don't get hit by the roll and make sure your health is high.
And then once this is over, of course, you go back to phase 1, you do all the phase 1 nonsense. It's most likely that you will be in a slightly different position. Just make sure you do all group up on one single location again, because of course you do want to be grouped up because it makes it easier for the acid turret healing and all that kind of good stuff. And then of course once you get through that, another phase 2. If you do manage to get a third phase 2, you're gonna die. It's very hard to get to this point, to be honest. If you have like all your DPS up, you should never reach this point, but in the third phase 2, he will win rage and just flat out one-shot your entire raid.
And that's more or less it, guys. It's just mainly the whole fight just revolves around phase 2. Phase 1 is just use cooldowns at this point.
Yeah, pretty much.
You could even make a weak aura that has a list of what cooldowns you use for each acid torrent if you really wanted to. But eventually you'd get used to it and it wouldn't really be a problem. It's just doing this phase 2, avoiding the roll, and trying to remain stacked as possible. But you do still need people to trail off to kill boxes. But just when they do that, make sure they're, it's safe for them to do that and they don't get hit by rolls or anything. But that's the encounter. If this guide did help out, then please do drop us down a like. It helps us out a lot. And if you'd like to see any of our other Mythic Blackrock Foundry guides, then please do click up on the annotations you see on your screen now. It'll take you straight to those videos.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.